California voters sending a stark message to Democrats after a liberal city voted to recall its progressive district attorney, a move that many expect will deal a blow to soft-on-crime policies and force the left to reevaluate their approach as the midterms draw near. Welcome to Hour 2 of Fox News Live, everyone. I'm Anita Vogel. Griff, great
Anita,
to see you.
it's great to have you,
Yeah.
and I'm Griff Jenkins. Voters in San Francisco expressing their frustrations with Chesa Boudin to Fox Digital several weeks ago. Watch this.
The right-wing billionaires outspent us 3-1. They exploited an environment in which people are appropriately upset. And they created an electoral dynamic where we were literally shadow boxing.
The DA's got to go. That's how a lot of people feel about it, because he's not doing a job, and everybody's pissed off about it.
A lot of voters who voted for him actually felt duped, felt like it was a bait and switch.
We begin this hour with our political panel, former Obama campaign communications advisor and author of Patriots of Two Nations, Spencer Critchley, and former communications director for the National Republican Congressional Committee and Targeted Victory Vice President Matt Gorman. Spencer and Matt, thank you for being there. Spencer, I've got to go straight to you. In the woke Camelot of the progressive revolution of San Francisco, you see voters rejecting outright the policies in the soft-on-crime approach that Chesa Boudin had. What does this mean? Put it in context for us.
Yeah, the thing I would emphasize is that for every complicated problem, there's an answer that's simple and wrong. And this is true on the right and the left, and it's true of the whole attitude of thinking we only have two choices between the right approach or the left approach, the tough on crime approach, the soft on crime approach. I've actually spent years working as part of a very successful effort to reduce violent crime in the Salinas, California effort, which is really a national model. And it brought right and left together. And it's a mix of what you might call soft on crime and what you might call hard on crime. But what's really going on is it's smart. And it's led to a dramatic reduction in crime. We've seen the same thing in San Jose and other cities. And I think what you're seeing in San Francisco is pragmatic liberals who want to do what works and who don't need to stick with a particular ideology at the expense of what works.
I don't know, Spencer. Matt, you can maybe answer this. It seems to me you see the recall happening in Los Angeles. You see an effort in New York, all DAs, as well as in Philadelphia. It seems from coast to coast, even liberal voters do not want to see shoplifters running loose in stores, do not want to see people attacked on subways, do not want to see aggressive homeless encampments in their cities where they walk the streets. Do you believe, Matt, that this is larger than Spencer says?
I think it is. I mean, I was in Santa Monica, California just last week. I was at a CVS, and the clerk and I just noticed a guy with arms full of stuff walk out brazenly in broad daylight. And the clerk looks at me and she goes, "I know it's our policy not to chase them, but it's just really frustrating." And I was there for 24 hours and saw this. Imagine living there regularly, what you see. And look, violent crime, murders and robberies get the headlines, and rightfully so. But whether it's San Francisco, LA, or just, regular folks, they see things like homelessness, open-air drug use, shoplifting, as you said, car break-ins. That's the stuff that they see regularly, and it doesn't get the headlines, yet it affects them. And look, police, we can throw every criminal in jail all you want, right? Arrest anybody and everybody. But if these far-left DAs are letting them out in a matter of hours, what the heck's it matter?
Spencer, it's June 11th. I want them to hit record on the tape here. I am going to predict to you that you're going to see the word progressive washed out, wiped out, deleted from the political campaigns of liberal Democrats between now and November. You're 5 months out. How do the progressives deal with this issue and not get just wholesale thrown out of office?
Let me just start by pointing out that while those anecdotes that Matt just cited stick in our minds, they don't reflect the actual situation across the country. I live in Monterey, California, and like much of California, it's close to a paradise. We never see scenes like that. Furthermore, if you look at the data across the country, violent crime actually happens to be worse in many Republican-controlled jurisdictions. Now, this does not mean that it's the fault of Republicans. It means this is a complicated problem that isn't going to be solved by one single magic bullet on the basis of anecdotes. As far as progressivism goes, one thing I think we on the left need to do is reclaim the word progressive from radical ideologues who've kind of hijacked it. There's a grand tradition of progressivism that goes back through Franklin Delano Roosevelt and, frankly, to the Republican Teddy Roosevelt that just represents progress that all Americans are on board for. And I think that's what we need to do, is talk about real progress and get away from this ideological tribal warfare that doesn't do any of us any good.
Matt, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah. Well, notice I didn't mention violent crime. And, San Francisco, L.A., they're not some Second Amendment pro-gun bastions. It's not necessarily about violent crime. That's not what Chesa Boudin's recall is really about. It's about quality of life. Again, what people see when they walk down the street. That's what this is about, and that's what you're going to see.
Quality of life is amazing here, and there's a meth epidemic and terrible desperation across much of red America. Again, this is not the fault of Republicans. This is a crisis in lifestyle issues as well as violent crime issues that we need to address by recognizing that there's no one simple magic bullet answer, like getting rid of liberal DAs, for example. It'll solve a complicated problem like that.
All right, Spencer, I don't want to pick on you, but since you brought up quality of life, standard of living, California paying $6.43 a gallon, nationwide $5 gas. No American living has ever experienced that, and neither has any in history. Inflation now at a 41-year high at 8.6%. How, Spencer, do Democrats make a pitch to their voters that this is acceptable, this is an okay standard of living, which is declining, people having to make sacrifices now at the grocery store, at the gas pump, and elsewhere?
Well, I suspect that that's not going to be the centerpiece of the Democratic message going forward. This is another case where images stick in the mind, and Democrats can list all the different reasons why inflation is spiking across the world at similar levels to in the United States, and why there are multiple causes, some of which are not fully understood by economists yet, and they can trot out all those arguments and be defeated by a single image of those gas prices you're talking about. So my advice to Democrats is to somehow get out of their heads and stop listing bullet points and confusing policy with politics, and realize they need to not just tell people what they're doing about inflation, they need to show them. And this is something that Republicans have been better at for decades now, really since the dawn of television politics in the 1960s. And Democrats have been scrambling to catch up, with exceptions like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama. But for the most part, Democrats need to, as I say, stop confusing policy with politics and communicate more in images and actions than bullet points.
That's such a great point. Matt, I want to give you the last word. Spencer really nailing something on the head. Today, for the first time, we saw when the President Biden was out in California being a little bit honest about inflation, saying that, quote, we're going to have to live with inflation for a while. A stark contrast to what he's been saying about it being transitory. I'll give you the last word, Matt.
Yeah, true, but notice who he was blaming for it. He somehow blamed Putin or the oil companies as if Putin was the one that injected trillions of dollars into the economy and devalued the currency, or if Putin was the one that ignored warnings for months about baby formula. They have suddenly all these boogeymen, and he's the most powerful man in the world, but yet when he comes to his problems, he suddenly seems very helpless. And I think that's why all these excuses, all this blaming, puts Republicans in a very good position as we go into November.
Matt Gorman and Spencer Critchley kicking things off with our political panel. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Have a great rest of your weekend.
You too.
Subscribe to the Fox News YouTube channel to catch our nightly opens, stories that are changing the world and changing your life. From Tucker Carlson tonight.